Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Kapchas, CEO of Chestnut Park Real Estate. And today I'm going to provide you with the June market report for the Toronto and region resale market. No one market definitively speaks to where the market is going, but there's a lot of data in the June market report that I think is giving us some indication as to where the market has kind of progressed to and what we can anticipate as we move towards the second half of 2025. I mean, a little preliminary commentary. The first 6 months of 2025 have been quite tumultuous. We began the year with a great deal of enthusiasm, believing that, and optimistically believing that the market was going to start picking up. And then, of course, we had the inauguration of the Trump administration in January, and the issue of tariffs, the uncertainty that the tariffs created, caused the market to really go sideways in ways we hadn't anticipated. And as a result of that, the market was exceptionally slow, almost as slow as we've seen it in more than 3 decades. But as the year has gone on, and now that we've reached into June, we see some changes developing, and I might add, for the most part, a positive change has taken place. And I'll get into that at the tail end of this presentation for you. But there are some other aspects to the market that are both unusual and at the same time have a negative component as well. I guess the best place for me to start is what I would deem to be kind of the negative components that are in the market right now. And two are the average sale price and what's happening with inventory levels. In June, we finished the month with almost 32,000 active listings. It's not quite a record, but it's getting very, very close to a record. To put that number, approximately 32,000 units, into perspective, I looked back to see how many properties were on the market in June of 2019. That period just before the pandemic, which also plays a huge role in where we find ourselves today. But that separate and apart from what we're talking about now, in June of 2019, there were 19,655 active listings, approximately half of the number that we have at the end of June. In fact, new listings in June came in at 19,839. In other words, more new listings came to the market in June of this year that were the total universe of available listings in June of 2019. So we're dealing with a huge amount of supply, and obviously a large amount of supply is giving buyers lots of choice. Buyers are not only examining and looking at many properties that are on the market, but it also gives them the ability to negotiate, to deal with sellers, and perhaps a little more sharply than they ever had an opportunity to do so, certainly in the recent past, and certainly not during the COVID era. So what we're seeing as a result of that is we're starting to see some compression on average sale prices. So for example, in the month of June, the average sale price came in at $1,101,000. It's almost 5.5% lower than what it was a year ago. And so through the course of the year, we've seen compression on average sale prices, and I believe that will continue. It'll be moderate, but it will continue as we make our way through the rest of the year. However, just looking at that number, 1,101,000, in isolation is not particularly helpful, because contained in that number are condominium apartments, which I'll talk about in a moment, and sales in the 905 region and sales in the 416 region. And I think it's very important that we, first of all, look at the bifurcation of what's happening in the 416 and in the 905. And they're clearly moving in very different directions. So separate and apart from condominium apartments, what we see is that during the month of June, ground level properties, detached, semi-detached properties, and townhouses in the 416, sales actually increased by 10%. What do we see in the case of the 905? Again, for detached, semi-detached, and townhouses, sales actually decreased by 8%. So we have sales increasing in the 416, sales decreasing in the 905. What does that bifurcation tell us? Well, it tells us that some of the COVID factors, the sanctuary housing exodus that happened, is clearly coming to an end. And people are starting to move back into the 416. And as a result of that, we're seeing the ground level properties, sales are starting to actually pick up. Similarly, if we look at prices, huge discrepancy in each of those categories. In the 416, the average sale price for a detached property came in at $1,641,000. Same type of property, actually it'll probably be a bigger property with more land, in the 905 came in at $1,302,000. Semi-detached in the 416, $1,278,000. In the 905, not even a million, $925,000. And if we look at townhouses, $957,000 in the case of townhouses sold in the city of Toronto, and only $846,000 townhouses in the 905. A huge differentiation between what's happening in the 905 and in the 416. And I might also add that when I was mentioning about those 32,000 odd properties that are the available inventory, a large part of those are in the 905, and much fewer of them are in the 416, the City of Toronto. The other thing that we need to look at is condominium apartments. Condominium apartments, of that 32,000 active listings, condominium apartments form more than 30% of those. So 10 to 11,000 of those listings are condominium apartments. They are the least expensive housing type on the market, and unfortunately have taken the biggest, for lack of a better expression, beating as far as both sales and prices are concerned, particularly over the last year. In the month of June, average sale price in the 416 for condominium apartments was $731,000. In the 905, $630,000. So when we look at the overall average sale price for Toronto and region coming in at $1,100,000, you have to keep in mind that 35% of the sales contained in that number are condominium apartments, and they are the drag on the overall average sale price. So we have to also look at what is positive about this market, because generally most of what I've been talking about has been less than positive, except for what's happening in the 416. But the other thing that we have to look at is the total number of sales that happened in the month of June came in at 6,243. That was the 5th consecutive month, and you can see on the screen behind me the way in which sales have taken place starting in January right to June, and there's been an increase in every month since the beginning of the year. And partially that's due to the fact that people have become more comfortable with the uncertainty associated with the geopolitical issues that have been created by the American administration, and as a result of that are finally getting into the market. And we anticipate that that will continue, barring, of course, any further unusual geopolitical problems that might face the world. I mean, if there's a word for the American administration, it's probably erratic, and so we can anticipate anything. But barring anything of that nature, I think we'll continue to see sales move at a better pace than we saw during the first half of the year. That will be, as I said, for a couple of reasons. One, buyers are going to have a lot of choice out there, but they're finally exercising their rights to buy properties at prices that they're more comfortable paying. Hence, we see the moderation in the case of average sale prices, particularly in the 905. And I think also what we're seeing is a kind of a new optimism that's in the marketplace that also will help drive the second half of the year to a much better performance than we saw in the first half of the year. Later in the month of July, the Bank of Canada is meeting. We anticipate, although it hasn't always materialized in the last little while, that the bank might reduce its lending rate, its overnight benchmark rate, hopefully by something greater than 0.25%. But we'll see if that happens. If we see that happening, that combination of a lower bank rate and perhaps that being translated into more favorable mortgage financing rates, combined with the decline in average sale prices, we might be approaching affordability again, something that's been lacking in the marketplace, certainly since we hit the peak of average sale prices in February and March of 2022. So after all this data coming out of the June market report, I actually feel quite optimistic about the second half of 2025. And I look forward to providing you with further information as the months in the second half of 2025 come and go. So until then, stay well. Thank you.